The council chamber stretched wide across the floating station above the planet Zenith Prime. Delegates from 47 species sat in their assigned seats, each one representing millions of worlds across the galaxy. The walls glowed with soft blue light, and the air carried the mixed scents of 100 different atmospheres filtered and blended for the comfort of all. Admiral stood near the back of the human delegation area. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the older species. He watched the proceedings with quiet attention, his hands clasped behind his back. Beside him, Ambassador Pierce adjusted her tablet, reviewing notes from the morning session. "They still don't take us seriously," whispered Tu. "Let them think what they want," replied. His voice was calm and low. "We know what we can do." At the center of the chamber, Council Speaker has raised his wing-like arms. The avian leader's feathers shimmered with authority as he called for order. The various delegates settled into their seats, their conversations fading to silence. "We now hear the petition from the delegation," as announced. His translator device converted his chirping speech into words everyone could understand. A small figure moved to the speaking platform. The ambassador was barely 4 feet tall, with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to hold endless sadness. Her name was Myrazel, and she trembled as she stood before the assembled council. "Honored members," Myrazel began, her voice breaking. "My people face extinction. The N Empire has attacked our without warning or mercy. They bomb our cities, they target our hospitals and schools. 3 billion of my people have died in the past month alone." The chamber remained silent. Some delegates looked uncomfortable. Others examined their data pads with sudden interest. "Our defense fleet was destroyed in the first day," Myrazel continued. "We have no weapons that can stop them, no shields strong enough to protect us. The N blockade prevents any escape. In 3 weeks, perhaps less, there will be no left alive in the universe." Tears rolled down her face. "I beg this council for help. Send ships. Send soldiers. Send anything. Please do not let my species die." She stepped back from the platform, her whole body shaking. As looked across the assembled delegates, the council recognizes the N ambassador. A massive reptilian figure rose from his seat. Ambassador OK stood 8 feet tall, covered in dark green scales. His eyes were cold and yellow. "They brought this upon themselves," he said without emotion. "They refused to surrender territory that rightfully belongs to the N Empire. They rejected our generous terms. What happens now is the natural consequence of their foolish pride." "You're murdering children," Myrazel shouted from her seat. "You had a choice," OK replied. "You chose poorly." As raised his wings again. "Order, please. The council will now discuss potential responses to this situation." For the next hour and listened as the various species debated. Most agreed that the N actions were regrettable. Some used stronger words, calling it genocide and a crime against all sentient life. But when the discussion turned to action, the chamber grew quiet. "Our fleets are committed to the border disputes with the collective," one delegate explained. "We cannot risk war with the N Empire," another said. "They have over 3,000 warships." "Perhaps economic sanctions," a third suggested weakly. His jaw tightened as he listened, touched his arm gently, feeling the tension in him. "In 3 weeks, sanctions won't matter," she whispered. The debate continued in circles. Everyone agreed something should be done. No one volunteered to actually do anything. Myrazel sat in her chair, her hope visibly draining away with each passing minute. Finally, as called for a vote on sending a council peacekeeping force. The result was 32 against, 12 in favor, 3 abstaining, that would receive no help. "This council is adjourned," as declared. Delegates began to rise, already moving on to other business. Myrazel remained in her seat, staring at nothing. Her world was dying, and the galaxy's most powerful organization had just told her it didn't matter enough. Ambassador Pierce said quietly, "I need you to do something." Looked at him and saw the fire in his eyes. She had known for 15 years. She recognized that look. "What are you thinking?" "Request the floor," said, "right now." Stood and raised her hand. "Council Speaker, the human delegation requests to address the chamber." As turned, surprised, several delegates who had been leaving stopped and looked back. Humanity had joined the council only 6 months ago. They almost never spoke during sessions. "The council has concluded its business for the day," as said. Then we request an emergency addition to the agenda, insisted. It will take only a moment. As glanced at the other senior delegates, a few nodded. Very well, the human delegation may speak. Walked to the speaking platform. The chamber felt enormous around her. 47 species, thousands of years old, billions of citizens. And humanity, the members, barely established beyond their own solar system. The human government has heard the petition, said. Her voice was steady and clear. We have seen the evidence of the attacks. We have confirmed the end blockade and the death toll among civilians. Yes, it is tragic, as said. But as discussed, the Council lacks the resources to intervene. The Council may lack resources, replied, but humanity does not. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Several delegates made sounds that translated as laughter. No disrespect intended, Ambassador Pierce, said a delegate from the species. But humanity has what, 30 ships? Perhaps 40. The N Empire fields over 3,000 warships crewed by warriors who have fought for centuries. What could your species possibly do? Looked directly at Myrazel. The ambassador had raised her head, a tiny spark of hope returning to her eyes. We can answer when someone calls for help, said simply. She turned to face the full council. Earth is mobilizing our fleet now. We will break the N blockade. We will we will do what this council should have done. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted over each other. Some called it madness. Others said humanity would start a war that would consume the galaxy. A few voices praised the courage but questioned the wisdom. OK rose from his seat, his massive form radiating menace. If human ships enter space, the N Empire will consider it an act of war. We will destroy your pathetic fleet and then turn our attention to Earth itself. Your species will learn what happens to those who interfere in N affairs. Had been silent until now. He stepped forward to stand beside at the platform. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. We're coming, he said. Prepare accordingly. He turned to Myrazel and nodded once. The ambassador covered her face with her hands and wept, but this time the tears were different. And left the platform and walked toward the exit. Behind them, the council chamber descended into chaos. Delegates argued and shouted, as called for order repeatedly with no success. As they reached the doorway, looked at, do you realize what we just committed to? Yes, said, we promised to save a species from extinction. We might start a galactic war. Better than standing by and watching genocide, replied. He activated his communication device. This is Admiral to Earth Fleet Command. Execute Operation Guardian. I want every available ship ready to jump in 48 hours. The voice on the other end acknowledged the order. Took a deep breath. They think we're fools. Looked back at the chamber where the council still argued. They think we're weak. They think Earth is just another minor species playing at being important. They've made a lot of assumptions about humanity. And they're about to learn how wrong they are, said. When humans make a promise, we keep it. When someone needs help, we answer. And when we answer, we don't do anything halfway. Captain Diana stood on the bridge of the UHS Valiant and watched her crew work. They moved with practiced efficiency, running final checks on weapons systems and engines. The Valiant was a heavy cruiser, one of Earth's warships, and Diana had commanded her for 2 years. In that time, they had never seen real combat. That was about to change. Status report, Diana said. Her tactical officer, Commander Sophie Grant, looked up from her console. All weapons hot and ready, shields at full power, engine core running at 98% efficiency. Good, Diana checked the time. 46 hours since Admiral had given the order to mobilize. Across human space, every available warship was preparing to jump. The largest military operation in Earth's history was about to begin. A message appeared on Diana's screen. She opened it and read quickly. The final fleet roster had arrived. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the numbers. Sophie, come look at this, Diana said. The tactical officer crossed the bridge and read over Diana's shoulder. She went very still. That can't be right. It's right, Diana confirmed. 847 ships. Sophie let out a low whistle. The entire fleet, every last ship. Every destroyer, every cruiser, every battleship and carrier, even the patrol boats from the outer colonies. Diana looked at her officer. Command isn't holding anything back. We're leaving Earth defended by orbital platforms and fighter squadrons, Sophie said. If something goes wrong, then Earth falls, Diana finished. But if we don't do this, the die, all of them, every single one. Sophie nodded slowly. She understood the calculation, even if it frightened her. When do we jump? 2 hours, Diana said. Make sure the crew is ready. Across the solar system, similar conversations were happening on hundreds of ships. Captains briefed their crews. Engineers ran final diagnostics. Weapons officers loaded the last missiles and checked targeting systems. Marines inspected their armor and weapons, preparing for boarding actions. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath Geneva, admirals stood before a massive holographic display. It showed the positions of every human warship, color-coded by class and readiness status. Green lights dominated the display. The fleet was ready. "Sir, we're receiving transmission from the Galactic Council," said Lieutenant Cole, the communications officer. "Put it through," said Council speaker as appeared on the screen. The avian leader looked worried. "Admiral, I urge you to reconsider this action. The N Empire is not an enemy to take lightly. They have been waging war for 3,000 years. Their technology is advanced. Their warriors are experienced." "We're aware of the risks," replied. "Are you?" as challenged. "Your species has been in space for barely a century. You have fought no major wars against other species. The N will destroy whatever force you send. Please do not throw away lives for a lost cause." His expression didn't change. "Ambassador Myrazel asked for help. We said yes. We don't go back on our word." "How many ships are you sending?" as asked. 20, 30, even 50 ships would be suicide against the N blockade." "You'll see soon enough," said, "out." The screen went dark, turned to his staff officers. "All ships report status." "All ships green and ready, sir," reported. 847 warships standing by for your order. "Synchronize jump coordinates," ordered. "I want the entire fleet to arrive at the same time, perfect formation." "Yes, sir." Looked at the holographic display again. He thought about the Council's reaction when they saw what was coming. More importantly, he thought about the N reaction. They expected a token force. They were about to face something they had never encountered before, humanity at war. The truth was, humans had been fighting since they learned to make tools. For thousands of years, humans had waged war on each other. They had destroyed cities. They had built weapons of terrible power. They had learned every lesson warfare could teach, written in the blood of billions. But in the last century, something had changed. Humanity had finally united. They had turned their talent for war toward protection instead of conquest. They had built ships and weapons not to attack others, but to defend the innocent. Though we're innocent, the N were attacking them without mercy. That made the decision simple for humanity. "Sir, all ships report ready for jump," said. Took a deep breath. "Signal the fleet. Execute jump in 60 seconds." Across human space, 847 ships received the signal. Their crews made final preparations. Jump drives powered up, building energy for the massive leap across space. Some crew members prayed. Others checked their weapons one more time. All of them knew what they were about to do could change everything. On the bridge of the UHS Defender, Captain Hayes watched the countdown. His ship was a battleship, the largest class in the human fleet. The Defender carried enough firepower to level a continent. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. 30 seconds, his navigation officer reported. Thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was 7 years old. He had promised her he would come home. He intended to keep that promise. But first, he had another promise to keep. Humanity had told that they were coming. Nothing would stop that from happening. 10 seconds, the navigator counted down. 9, 8, 7. All across human space, hundreds of ships reached the same moment. Their jump drives hit full power. Space itself began to tear open, creating doorways to distant stars. 3, 2, 1, jump. The UHS Valiant vanished from Earth space in a flash of light. A moment later, the Defender followed. Then another ship, and another, until the sky above Earth blazed with 800 points of light appearing and disappearing in rapid succession. The human fleet was moving. In orbit above Prime, N sensors detected the approaching jump signatures. The officer on duty studied the readings and frowned. Something was wrong. The signatures were too numerous. His equipment must be malfunctioning. He ran a diagnostic. The equipment was working perfectly. He checked again, still the same readings. hundreds of jump signatures all heading toward the system. The officer grabbed his communication device. "This is Sensor Station 3 to Fleet Command. We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" his commander demanded. "The humans are coming, sir." "Yes, we know how many ships." The sensor officer looked at his screen again, hoping the number would change. It didn't. "Sir, I'm reading 847 incoming signatures." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "That's impossible. Check your equipment." "I already did, sir. It's working correctly. They're bringing their entire fleet." More silence. The officer could almost hear his commander's thoughts. The N blockade consisted of 200 ships, strong enough to keep the trapped and defend against any rescue attempt. But against 800 ships, the mathematics were brutal and simple. "Sound alert status," the commander finally ordered. "Get Admiral or on the line immediately." Across the N blockade fleet, alarms began to sound. Warriors rushed to battle stations. Weapons came online, shields powered up. But even as they prepared, every N officer was doing the same calculation. 847 against 200. In the command center on the largest N ship, Admiral or listened to the sensor reports. He was a veteran of 100 battles. He had fought species that most humans had never heard of. He had won victories that were studied in military academies across the galaxy. But he had never faced anything like this. "Could it be a sensor error?" he asked, knowing the answer. "No, sir," his sensor officer replied. "Multiple stations confirm. 847 human warships inbound. They'll arrive at the system edge in approximately 4 hours." Or sat back in his command chair. He had read the intelligence reports on humanity, a young species barely established beyond their limited combat experience, outdated weapons technology. The reports had estimated Earth could field perhaps 50 warships at most. The reports were clearly wrong. "Send a message to the N High Command," or ordered. "Inform them of the situation. Request reinforcements." "Sir, reinforcements are 3 days away at minimum." "I know," or said quietly. "Send the message anyway." 4 hours later, at the edge of the system, space began to tear open. 847 holes appeared in reality, each one glowing with the energy of a jump drive. For a moment, nothing emerged. Then the first ship appeared. The UHS Valiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation with her sister ships. All around her, human warships materialized from nothing, filling the space with metal and weapons. Destroyers and frigates formed the outer edges. Cruisers and battleships held the center. Carriers moved to the rear, their fighter squadrons already launching. On the bridge of the Valiant, Diana watched her tactical display fill with green icons representing friendly ships. 847 lights, all exactly where they were supposed to be. "Perfect jump," Sophie reported. "0 casualties, all ships report ready for combat." Diana opened the fleet-wide channel. "This is Captain to all ships. Welcome to space. Stay in formation, follow the Admiral's orders, and remember why we're here." In the center of the fleet, on the battleship UHS Liberty, Admiral looked at the tactical display showing the N blockade. 200 ships positioned in orbit around the. They had already detected the human fleet. Their weapons were hot. Admiral or watched the human fleet advance on his tactical display. 847 ships moving in perfect formation. He had sent the withdrawal ultimatum to N High Command. Their response had been brief and clear: destroy the human fleet. "They actually think they can fight us," his weapons officer said with contempt. "Young species always overestimate themselves." Or was not so certain. He had fought for 60 years. He had learned to respect any enemy who showed discipline and coordination. The human fleet moved with both. Their formation was textbook perfect. Their spacing suggested they understood combined arms tactics. "What do we know about human weapons?" or asked. His intelligence officer brought up a file. "Limited data, sir. They use kinetic weapons primarily, missiles and mass drivers, some energy weapons but not their main armament. Their ships are heavily armored, but their shields are weaker than ours." "Kinetic weapons?" or repeated. The N had moved beyond such primitive technology centuries ago. Their energy weapons could slice through most armor. Their shields were designed to deflect energy attacks. But shields that stopped energy did not always stop solid matter. "Sir, the hour deadline is approaching." his communications officer reported. Or made his decision. All ships to battle positions, power all weapons. We will show these humans why the N Empire rules this sector. The N blockade fleet spread out from their orbital positions. 200 warships, each one larger than most human vessels. They had superior technology. They had experienced crews. The odds still favored them despite being outnumbered. On the planet below, in the underground shelter that served as the government headquarters, Prime Minister Ara watched the orbital displays. Her people had huddled in shelters for weeks, hiding from N bombardment. They had watched their defense fleet die. They had sent a desperate plea to the Galactic Council and been ignored. Then the humans had arrived. How many ships did they bring? Ara asked her military advisor. 847, Prime Minister. Ara closed her eyes. Her people numbered 12 billion. The humans had brought nearly 1,000 ships to save them. A species they had never met. A species that owed them nothing. Why, she whispered, why would they do this? Her advisor had no answer. In space, the 1-hour deadline expired. Admiral watched the N fleet maintain position. They had chosen to fight. He had given them a chance to leave. They had refused it. All ships transmitted. You are weapons free. Execute attack plan Alpha. Show them what happens when you threaten the innocent. The human fleet surged forward. The outer screen of destroyers and frigates accelerated ahead, moving at speeds that surprised the N. Behind them, the cruisers and battleships formed firing lines. The carriers launched their remaining fighters, adding hundreds of small craft to the attack. Or watch them come. All ships open fire when they enter range. The two fleets rushed toward each other. The space between them shrank rapidly. 5,000 kilometers, 4,000, 3,000. Fires or ordered. The N fleet unleashed everything. Energy beams lanced across space, bright enough to blind unprotected eyes. Plasma bolts followed, each one carrying the heat of a small star. The weapons had destroyed countless enemies over centuries of warfare. The human destroyers leading the charge took the first hits. Energy beams struck their shields, which flared and failed quickly, just as N intelligence had predicted. The beams cut into armor. Several ships took critical damage immediately. Human shields failing, the N weapons officer reported with satisfaction. Their formations are breaking. But Or saw something different. The damaged destroyers were not breaking formation. They were continuing their charge despite taking hits. And behind them, the main human fleet was spreading out, presenting more targets than the N could engage at once. All ships return fire, ordered calmly. The human fleet opened up. Missiles launched in massive swarms, hundreds of them streaking across space. Mass drivers fired solid slugs at incredible velocities. The N had expected primitive weapons. They got a steel hurricane. The first missiles reached N ships. Their energy shields activated, designed to deflect or absorb energy weapons. The missiles were physical objects. They punched through shields like they were not there and detonated against armor. Explosions rippled across N hulls. Armor cracked. Compartments vented atmosphere. Damage alarms screamed on a dozen ships. Shields are ineffective against their weapons, a N officer shouted. Or understood immediately. The humans had built their entire military around kinetic weapons because they came from a world where they fought each other. Human wars had taught them that solid matter was harder to stop than energy. Now that advantage was brutal. Evasive maneuvers, or ordered, don't let them target you. But the human fleet had numbers. Where one N ship maneuvered away from a firing line, 3 human ships were there to take the shot from different angles. The mathematics of 800 against 200 became clear. Captain Diana stood on the bridge of the Valiant and watched her tactical display. The battle was chaos, but controlled chaos. The human fleet followed the attack plan precisely. Destroyers harassed and drew fire. Cruisers pounded larger targets. Battleships held position and provided devastating covering fire. Target the command ship, Diana ordered. Hit them with everything. The Valiant's main guns fired. 6 mass driver slugs, each one weighing 3 tons, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. They crossed the distance towards flagship in seconds. 4 missed. 2 hit. The flagship shuddered. Its armor held but barely. Damage reports flooded the bridge. Hull breach on decks 12 through 15, an officer reported. Shields failing on the port side. Concentrate fire on that human cruiser, or ordered. 3 N ships focused their energy weapons on the Valiant. Diana's shields collapsed almost immediately. Beams cut into her armor. The ship rocked from impacts. Damage report, Diana demanded. Port armor compromised. We've lost 2 weapons batteries. Hull breach on deck 7. Seal it, redirect power to starboard weapons. Keep firing. The Valiant continued to fight even as energy beams carved into her hull. Around her, other human ships moved to support, adding their own fire to suppress the N attackers. This was the pattern across the battlefield. N ships had superior individual weapons and better technology, but they were outnumbered 4-1. For every human ship they damaged, 2 more took its place, and human ships kept fighting long after N vessels would have withdrawn. Why won't they retreat? A N officer asked in confusion, watching a human destroyer continue firing even as it vented atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches. Or knew why? These were not warriors fighting for territory or resources. These were defenders fighting for someone else's survival. That changed everything about their willingness to sacrifice. On the UHS Defender, Captain Hayes coordinated his battleship group. 5 of humanity's largest warships moved in formation, their combined firepower focused on the N heavy cruisers. Target lock on enemy cruiser Delta 7, his weapons officer reported. Fire main batteries, ordered. The Defender's primary weapons unleashed hell. Mass drivers and missile pods fired in sequence. The targeted N cruiser tried to maneuver, but 3 other human battleships had already cut off its escape routes. The kinetic barrage hit from multiple angles. The N ship's armor failed. Secondary explosions rippled through its hull. It began to drift, its power core failing. Enemy cruiser disabled, the weapons officer confirmed. Next target, said without pause. The battle had been raging for 3 hours. The space around Prime was filled with debris and the flash of weapons fire. Human ships bore scars and damage, but they held formation. The N fleet was breaking apart. Or watched his tactical display with growing desperation. He had started with 200 ships. 37 were destroyed. 64 more were critically damaged and unable to fight. The humans had lost ships too, but they still had over 700 combat-capable vessels. "Sir, we cannot win this," his second officer said quietly. Or knew it was true. Pride made him want to fight to the end. Experience told him that death served no purpose when defeat was certain. "Signal all ships," Or said, his voice heavy. "Begin withdrawal, full retreat to the system edge." The N fleet broke off the engagement. Those ships still able to move accelerated away from the planet, running for the jump point. The human fleet pursued, continuing to fire. "Sir, should we press the attack?" Sophie Grant asked Diana. Diana checked with fleet command. Admiral's orders came back quickly. "Let them go. Our mission is to protect not to destroy the N fleet. All ships maintain orbital position over Prime." The human fleet slowed its pursuit and began to form a defensive perimeter around the planet. The N ships that could still jump began to disappear, fleeing back to their empire. Those too damaged to jump were given a choice: surrender or be destroyed. Most chose surrender. On the planet's surface, Aura watched the orbital display as the human fleet took up protective positions. The N blockade was gone. The bombardment had stopped. The sky above Prime was now guarded by human ships. "They did it," her advisor whispered. "They actually did it." Aura activated the planetary broadcast system. Her voice reached every shelter, every hiding place where huddled in fear. "My people," she began, her voice breaking with emotion. "The N fleet is broken. The humans have driven them away. We are safe. Our children are safe. The humans came when no one else would. They fought for us. They bled for us, and they won." Across the planet, 12 billion emerged from their shelters. They looked up at the sky and saw human ships where N vessels had hung like executioners' blades for weeks. Some fell to their knees. Others wept. All of them understood they had witnessed something extraordinary. A species they had never met had crossed the galaxy to save them, had brought 800 ships and fought a battle they did not have to fight, had kept a promise when keeping it meant risking everything. On the Liberty, Admiral received damage reports from the fleet: 43 ships destroyed, over 100 damaged, 3,000 human lives lost. But 12 billion lives saved. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet, Cole reported. Prime Minister Ara wishes to speak with you. Put her through, said. The small appeared on his screen, tears streaming down her blue face. Admiral Idan, the city had once been home to 3 million. Captain Diana walked through its ruins and tried not to think about how many had died here. Buildings stood like broken teeth against the sky. Blast craters marked where orbital strikes had hit. The smell of smoke and death still hung in the air. Over here, Captain, called Lieutenant Commander. The Marine officer was coordinating the humanitarian effort in this sector. We've got survivors in this building. Diana followed him to what had been an apartment complex. Half of it had collapsed. The other half leaned at a dangerous angle. The Marines had set up support beams to stabilize it while they searched for survivors. Inside, Diana found a small group huddled in what had been a basement. 12 of them, including 5 children. They had been hiding here for 2 weeks, surviving on stored food and rainwater collected through cracks in the rubble. A woman stepped forward. She was thin and dirty, her blue skin pale from lack of sunlight, but her dark eyes were fierce. "Are you real?" she asked in broken English. "Or am I finally going mad?" "We're real," Diana assured her. "I'm Captain Diana of the United Human Fleet. We're here to help." The woman stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned to the children and said something in the language. The children rushed forward, surrounding Diana and reaching out to touch their uniforms as if to confirm they were solid. "My name is N," the woman said. "These are my children and my neighbor's children, their parents." She gestured at the ruins around them. "The N bombed during the day when people were at work. The children were at school. I brought them here when the attack started." "You kept them safe," Diana said. "I tried," N's voice cracked. "But I was running out of food, out of water, out of hope. And then yesterday, the bombing stopped. We heard explosions in the sky, but different ones. We were too afraid to leave." "The explosions were the battle," explained gently. "We drove the N away. You're safe now." One of the children, a small boy no more than 5 years old, tugged on Diana's sleeve. He said something looking up at her with hope and fear mixed together. N translated. He wants to know if the monsters are really gone. Diana knelt down to the child's level. She thought about her own daughter back on Earth, safe and protected. This boy had lived through weeks of terror that no child should ever experience. "The monsters are gone," Diana said firmly, "and we're going to make sure they never come back." The boy reached out and hugged her. Diana felt her throat tighten. This was why they had come. This was why 43 human ships had been destroyed and 3,000 lives lost, for moments like this. "Let's get you all to the shelter," said. "We have food, clean water, and medical care." His Marines helped the survivors out of the ruins. Diana watched them go and then continued her survey of the city. The destruction was overwhelming. Entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, infrastructure destroyed, bodies still buried in the wreckage. Her communicator beeped. "Here." "Captain, this is Dr. Wade at Field Hospital 7. I need you to come here when you have a moment." "On my way," Diana replied. She found the field hospital set up in a building that had somehow survived mostly intact. Human medical teams worked alongside doctors, treating the wounded and sick. The hospital was full of civilians, many of them children. Wade met her at the entrance. The fleet medical chief was in her 50s, a veteran of 20 years in space medicine. She looked exhausted. "I wanted you to see this," said, leading Diana through the hospital. They passed beds filled with suffering from various injuries and illnesses, burns from energy weapons, broken bones from collapsed buildings, malnutrition from weeks of hiding with limited food. Human doctors and nurses moved among them, treating each one with care and compassion. Stopped at a bed in the intensive care unit. A N soldier lay there, heavily bandaged. He was missing one arm and had severe burns across half his body. "This is Captain," said. "His ship was disabled in the battle. He was found floating in an escape pod, barely alive." Diana stared at the N. This creature's species had tried to exterminate had killed millions of innocent civilians, had bombed schools and hospitals without mercy. "Why is he here?" Diana asked. "Why are we treating him?" "Because he was dying," said simply. "And I'm a doctor. I don't let people die if I can save them, regardless of who they are." The N's eyes opened. He looked then at Diana. His translator device was damaged but still functional. "Why," he rasped, Why save enemy? Pulled up a chair and sat beside his bed. Because you're a living being in pain. That makes you my patient, not my enemy. We killed your allies, said. Children, civilians, we showed no mercy. I know, replied. And that was wrong, but I won't become what you were. I won't let hatred turn me into someone who leaves the wounded to die. Closed his eyes. You are strange creatures, humans. You fight like demons, kill like predators, but then you save your enemies. I do not understand. Maybe that's the difference between us and you, Diana said quietly. We remember that our enemies are still people, still alive, still capable of changing. She left with her patient and continued through the hospital. In another ward, she found sitting with a group of children. He was showing them pictures of Earth on his tablet. The children crowded around him, fascinated. Diana stopped and watched. Was a good Marine and a better man. She knew his story. He had lost his wife and daughter in an accident 3 years ago, a transport crash that he had survived, but they had not. It had nearly broken him. Now he sat with these children who had lost their parents, showing them that life could still hold wonder and hope. One of the children asked a question. His translator converted it. Why did you come to save us? Thought for a moment before answering. Because a long time ago I lost people I loved. I couldn't save them, but I can save you, and that matters. The child reached out and took his hand. The Marine's eyes glistened, but he smiled. Diana moved on, leaving him to his moment. She found herself in the supply distribution area, where human logistics officers were coordinating with officials to get food and water to every survivor. Commander Sophie Grant was there, managing the flow of supplies. She looked up as Diana approached. How bad is it? Diana asked. Bad, Sophie said, but manageable. We're getting supplies to about 80% of the survivors. The other 20% are in areas too damaged to reach easily. We're working on it. What do they need most? Everything: food, water, medicine, shelter, basic tools to start rebuilding. But you know what they need most of all? What? Hope, Sophie said. They need to believe that life can be normal again, that they're not just waiting for the next attack. Diana nodded. Then we give them that. We stay until they feel safe again. Over the next few days, the human fleet worked tirelessly. Ships in orbit established a defensive perimeter. Ground teams helped clear rubble and search for survivors. Medical personnel treated the wounded. Engineers helped restore basic infrastructure. And slowly, they began to emerge from their shelters. En brought her children to the central plaza, where humans had set up a large relief camp. She watched human soldiers distribute food with gentle efficiency. Watched human doctors treat patients with the same care they would show their own species. Watched human engineers work alongside workers to repair a damaged water treatment plant. Why, she asked a human Marine who was handing out blankets, why do you care so much? The Marine, a young woman named Kelly, smiled. Because you're people, you were suffering, we could help. It's really that simple. But you barely know us, En protested. We're not your species, not your responsibility. Kelly paused in her work and looked directly at En. My grandmother used to tell me a story. A long time ago, before humans went to space, there was a terrible war on Earth. Millions of people died. Afterward, the survivors had a choice. They could hate each other and keep fighting, or they could choose to be better. They chose better. They built a world where helping others wasn't about what species you were or where you came from. It was about being decent, about doing what's right. She handed En a blanket. So when we heard your people needed help, we didn't think about whether you were human. We thought about whether you needed us. And you did, so we came. En took the blanket and hugged it to her chest. We will never forget this. In the En prisoner ward, Wade continued to treat. His injuries were healing slowly. He would live, though he would never regrow the arm he had lost. You could have let me die, said during one of her visits. It would have been easier, one less enemy to worry about. Probably, agreed, but easy isn't always right. What will happen to me now? That's not my decision. The government will decide what to do with En prisoners, but you'll be healthy enough to face whatever comes. Was silent for a moment. Then, I was there when we bombed the schools. I fired on civilian targets. I told myself it was war, that they were weak and deserved conquest. I never questioned it. And now asked, now I see humans treating me, an enemy who tried to kill their allies. I see your people saving children, rebuilding their cities, showing mercy to those who showed none. He looked at his missing arm. I understand now. We were not warriors, we were murderers, and you are not conquerors. You are something we never learned to be. What's that? Asked. Protectors, said quietly. You came not to take, you came to save. Nodded. Try to remember that. When this is over, when you go home, remember what real strength looks like. It's not about who has the biggest weapons or the most ships. It's about what you choose to do with your power. Outside the hospital, sat with N's children in a small park that human engineers had cleared of debris. They were teaching him words in. He was teaching them words in English. They were laughing. Diana watched from a distance and felt something shift in her chest. This was humanity at its Be the Galactic Council chamber was more crowded than Ambassador Pierce had ever seen it. Representatives from every member species filled the seats. Others stood in the observation areas. Word of humanity's intervention at Prime had spread across the galaxy, and everyone wanted to witness what came next. Stood in the human delegation area, Admiral beside her. They had received the summons 3 days ago, an emergency session to address humanity's actions. The tone of the message had been ominous. They're going to make an example of us, said quietly. Half these species are terrified that we'll do to them what we did to the N. Let them be afraid, replied. Fear keeps people honest. Council speaker has called the session to order. The chamber fell silent. We are here to address the recent military action taken by humanity in the system, as began. His voice was formal and cold. The council will hear testimony from all relevant parties before making a determination on appropriate responses. Tensed responses, not actions, not decisions. Responses implied punishment. The council recognizes the Emperor, as announced. A massive holographic projection appeared in the center of the chamber. Emperor OK was even larger than the other N had seen. His scales were darker, almost black, and his eyes burned with rage. The human species has committed an act of war against the N Empire, OK declared, his voice booming through the chamber. They attacked our fleet without provocation, destroyed our ships, killed our warriors. This cannot stand. We demand that the Council impose immediate sanctions on humanity. We demand reparations for our losses, and we demand that the humans responsible for this attack be turned over to end justice. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement, others looked uncertain. The representative wishes to speak, as said. Prime Minister Ara stepped to the speaking platform. She looked different than the last time I'd seen her. Healthier, stronger, hopeful. I stand before you alive because of humanity, Ara said. Her voice carried despite her small size. My species survives because humans answered when we called for help. When this council refused to act when you left us to die, humanity came. They brought 800 ships. They fought the N blockade. They drove our executioners away. She turned to face Emperor OK's projection. You speak of provocation. You speak of justice. Where was justice when you bombed our cities? When you targeted our schools and hospitals? When you murdered 3 billion of my people for refusing to surrender our freedom? You were conquered territory, OK snarled. You had no right to resist. We had every right to live, Ara shot back, and humans recognized that right when no one else would. She looked around the chamber at the assembled species. I have heard what some of you say, that humanity is dangerous, that they are too violent, too willing to fight. But I tell you this, I wish every species in this galaxy had humanity's courage. I wish every species had their willingness to stand up for the innocent. My 12 billion people are alive today because humans were willing to risk everything to save strangers. She stepped down from the platform, her message delivered, felt a swell of gratitude for the small leader. The council recognizes the human delegation, as said. Walked to the platform, very aware of the hundreds of eyes watching her. She carried a data tablet with carefully prepared remarks. She set it aside. What she needed to say did not require notes. 6 weeks ago, Ambassador Myrazel stood where I stand now, began. She begged this council for help. Her people were being exterminated. They had weeks to live, maybe days. She asked you to act. Paused, letting her words sink in. This council debated, you discussed, you expressed concern, you took a vote, and you decided to do nothing. We lacked the military resources, a delegate protested. You lacked the will, corrected. Because helping them meant risking conflict with the N Empire. It meant putting your own people in danger, so you chose to let them die rather than face that risk. The chamber erupted in angry voices, as called for order. Humanity made a different choice, continued. We mobilized our entire fleet, 847 ships. We risked war with the N. We lost 43 vessels and 3,000 lives. We did this for a species we had never met, for people we owed nothing to. We did it because it was right. She turned to face Okay's projection. You call it an act of war, we call it justice. You murdered billions, we stopped you. If that makes us your enemy, then we accept it proudly. You will regret this arrogance, Okay threatened. The N Empire will not forget this insult. Good, said, stepping forward to join at the platform. Don't forget. Remember what happened when you met a species that fights for others instead of just for themselves. Remember how fast your blockade broke when faced with real opposition. And remember that next time you consider targeting civilians, humanity might come for you again. The chamber fell silent. Its words hung in the air like a challenge. The Emperor glared at him with pure hatred but said nothing more. The Council will now vote on sanctions against humanity, as announced. Before you do, said, you should know something. We have been contacted by 17 species in the last 3 days. They want to establish formal alliances with Earth. They want mutual defense treaties. They want to know that if they are ever in the position that we're in, humanity will come for them too. She pulled up a holographic display showing the list of species. Some of them are Council members, others are not, but all of them have seen what we did. They know that humanity keeps its promises, that we defend our allies, that we do not abandon those who need us. We are building something new, added. An alliance based not on convenience or shared interests, but on shared values, on the belief that the strong should protect the weak, that innocent lives matter regardless of species, that genocide is never acceptable. He looked around the chamber. So vote for your sanctions if you must, but understand that humanity will continue to do what we believe is right, and any species that wants that kind of ally, that kind of friend, is welcome to join us. As called for the vote, watched the display as the results came in. It was closer than she expected, 30 votes for sanctions, 23 against, but the final tally still showed a majority. The motion fails, as announced. Sanctions require a 2/3 majority. The count is insufficient. Blinked in surprise. The motion had failed. They had expected punishment, but the Council could not even agree to impose it. However, as continued, the Council does recognize that humanity's actions, while controversial, prevented a genocide. Therefore, we propose a different measure. Humanity will be offered a permanent seat on the Council Security Committee. The chamber exploded in debate. Species shouted at each other. Some protested vehemently, others cheered. Leaned close to, they're trying to control us, put us in a position where we have to follow Council protocols. Or they're recognizing that we're too powerful to ignore, replied. And they want us inside the system rather than operating outside it. The vote will proceed, as announced. All in favor of granting humanity a permanent security committee seat. This vote was faster and more decisive. 42 in favor, 8 against, the rest abstained. The motion passes, as declared. Humanity is hereby granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Council Security Committee with full voting rights on all military and security matters. Looked at, they had come expecting to be punished. Instead, they had gained one of the most powerful positions in galactic politics. Accept it, said quietly. Use it to make sure this never happens again. Step to the platform. Humanity accepts this position with gratitude and humility. We pledge to use this authority to protect the innocent and prevent future atrocities. The session ended shortly after, and left the chamber surrounded by delegates wanting to speak with them. Species that had ignored humanity 6 weeks ago now sought their attention and favor. In orbit above Prime, Captain Diana stood on the bridge of the Valiant and watched the reconstruction efforts. Human ships remained on station, maintaining the protective perimeter. Below, on the planet's surface, and humans worked together to rebuild what the N had destroyed. Captain, we're receiving new orders from Fleet Command, her communications officer reported. Diana read the message. The bulk of the fleet would return to Earth within the week. A permanent garrison would remain at Prime, 50 ships and support personnel to ensure the N never returned. The Valiant would be among those staying. Diana smiled. She could think of worse assignments than protecting people who needed protection. On the planet below, in a small park that had been cleared of debris, N's children played while human Marines stood watch. sat on a bench, watching them. One of the children ran up to him and handed him a drawing. It showed a human ship in the sky above Prime, rendered in bright colors and childish strokes. "You like it?" the child asked in halting English. "I love it," said and meant it. The child smiled and ran back to play, looked at the drawing and thought about his own daughter who he would never see again. He could not save her, but he had helped save these children. In some small way, that eased the old pain. In the hospital, Wade made her final rounds. Most of the critical patients had stabilized. The medical system was beginning to function again with human support. She stopped its bed. The end prisoner was sitting up, looking healthier despite his missing arm. "I am being transferred tomorrow," he said, "to a prisoner of war facility." "You'll be treated fairly," assured him. "They are not like the N, they don't torture or abuse prisoners." "Because you taught them that," said. "Or perhaps reminded them. I have been watching your people these weeks, the way you work, the care you show even to enemies. I will carry this memory back to the N Empire." "And what will you tell them?" asked. "The truth, that we are not the superior species we believed ourselves to be. That true strength is not measured in weapons or ships, but in the courage to show mercy, in the will to protect the weak." He looked at his missing arm. "And that humanity possesses both kinds of strength in measure we cannot match." Nodded. "Good luck, Captain. And to you, Dr. Wade. I hope our species meet again under better circumstances." 2 weeks later, Admiral stood in the command center on Earth and watched the tactical display. The fleet had returned home. Repairs were on damaged ships. Memorial services had been held for the 3,000 who had not returned. But the mission had succeeded. They survived. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of, and alliances were forming that would reshape galactic politics. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission," Cole reported. "It's a distress call. The system is under attack by pirates. They're requesting assistance." Looked at the display. They were not part of any alliance with Earth. They were a peaceful species that had never bothered to build a military. Now they were paying the price. "How far away are they?" asked. 3 days at maximum speed." Thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. "Signal the ready fleet. Prepare for immediate deployment. How many ships can we field?" 74 are combat ready, sir." "Send them all," ordered. "They asked for help. We're going to answer." Smiled. "Yes, sir. Transmitting orders now." Across Earth's orbital facilities, ships began to power up. Crews rushed to battle stations. 74 warships prepared to jump to a distant system to help people they had never met. Because that was what humanity did now. When someone called for help, they answered. When the innocent were threatened, they responded. When justice required action, they acted. The galaxy had learned what it meant when aliens asked humanity for help. They had seen the unstoppable armada that answered. They had witnessed the fierce compassion and terrible strength that defined this young species. Some species feared it, some embraced it, but all of them understood it. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not with conquest or demands, but with protection and sacrifice. They had shown that the most dangerous species in the stars was not the one with the most weapons or the largest empire. It was the one that would cross the galaxy to save strangers. The one that kept its promises no matter the cost. The one that believed, with absolute conviction, that the innocent deserved protection and the strong had a duty to provide it. They had asked for help. Humanity had responded with an unstoppable armada, and in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. On Prime, as the sun set over, children played in parks protected by human ships. En watched them and thought about the days when she had believed her species would die, when she had hidden in rubble with children who had lost their parents, waiting for death to find them. Then the humans had come, with their ships and their weapons and their absolute refusal to let the innocent suffer. They had fought, they had bled, they had won. And they had stayed. She looked up at the sky where human vessels kept watch, eternal guardians against the darkness. And she whispered a prayer of thanks to whatever force in the universe had guided humanity to the stars. Because the galaxy was a better place with humans in it. Dangerous, yes, fierce and terrible in battle, but also kind, compassionate, willing to sacrifice for strangers. The best of what any species could hope to be. Above her, unaware of her prayer, a human ship maintained its patrol. Inside, men and women from Earth kept watch over a world they had saved, ready to fight again if needed. ready to answer if someone else called for help. Because that was what humans did. It was who they were. Protectors of the innocent, defenders of the weak, an unstoppable armada when the call came. And the call would come again. It always did. But now the galaxy knew humanity would answer. Not the warriors who had destroyed the N blockade, though that strength mattered. This was the humanity that chose to care, to help, to show mercy even to enemies. A message came through on her communicator. Admiral was requesting all senior officers for a briefing. Diana headed back to the shuttle that would take her to the Liberty. As she walked through the city, she saw human and working side by side. Saw children playing while human Marines stood guard. Saw hope returning to faces that had known only fear for weeks. This was why they had come. This was what 847 ships and 3,000 lives had been spent to protect. Not just the 12 billion people who lived here. They had fought to prove that in a galaxy where the strong preyed on the weak, where councils debated while innocents died, humanity would answer when someone called for help. And they had won. Have words to thank you. My people were dying. You saved us. Why would you do this for strangers? Thought about the question. He thought about the council that had stood by and done nothing. He thought about the N who had bombed civilians without mercy. He thought about the oath every human officer took to protect the innocent wherever they might be. Because someone had to, said simply. And because when someone asks humans for help, we answer, every time, no exceptions. Aura touched her hand to her heart in the gesture of deepest respect. We will never forget this, never. The transmission ended, looked out at the fleet surrounding the planet, damaged but victorious, bloodied but unbroken. They had done what they came to do. The galaxy had seen what happened when humanity made a promise. Now they would learn what it meant to have humans as friends, or as enemies. Opened a transmission on all frequencies, including ones the N would hear. This is Admiral of the United Human Fleet to all N forces in the system. You are conducting illegal military operations against a civilian population. You are hereby ordered to withdraw immediately. You have 1 hour to begin retreating. If you remain, we will remove you by force. This is your only warning. He closed the transmission and looked at his officers. All ships advance, combat formation, prepare for battle. The human armada began to move forward, 847 ships in perfect coordination. On the planet below, civilians looked up at their sky and saw hope approaching like thunder. They walked down the corridor toward the human delegation offices. Behind them, in the council chamber, OK was already sending word back to his empire. The humans had made their move. Soon the N would show these primitives the price of arrogance. But was already 3 steps ahead, coordinating with fleet commanders across human space. The N expected a small force of outdated ships crewed by inexperienced warriors. What they would get instead would shock the entire galaxy and change everything the old species thought they knew about humanity. They had asked for help, humanity had answered. Now the galaxy would see what that really meant.